Hey there, island dreamers, locals, and anyone craving a slice of paradise. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time, to the Fun and Key West podcast, where the vibe is always laid back, the stories are salty, and the drinks, well, they're definitely frozen. I'm your host, Michelle O'Connor, your unofficial tour guide to the Conch Republic. Whether you're planning your first trip, your fifth trip, or you're just daydreaming about trading the cubicle for the ocean breeze, you are in the right place. Here's the deal. This podcast is your insider's guide to all things Key West. We're talking where to eat, hello, conch fritters and key lime pie, where to drink, spoiler alert, there will be rum, where to stay, and all the quirky, wonderful things that make Key West the one-of-a-kind paradise we all love. Plus, we'll keep you up to date on the latest happenings, festivals, events, maybe even the occasional Hemingway lookalike sighting. And just to keep things spicy, we'll be bringing on some amazing guests now and then, locals, business owners, and people who know the island like the back of their sandy hand. So grab your flip-flops, pour yourself a cold one, and let's escape to the island state of mind together, whether you're tuning in from your hammock or your commute, while wishing it was a hammock. We've got all the Key West goodness coming your way. Thanks for being here. It's going to be a lot of fun in Key West. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of Historic Marker Monday. And today we're setting sail on a fascinating journey through history. Imagine it's the 1500s. No GPS, no maps, just the open sea and endless possibilities. That's exactly what Ponce de León and his crew faced as they explored Florida and the Keys over 500 years ago. Today, we're diving into the story behind a historic marker that honors this legendary explorer and his incredible 1513 voyage. From naming Florida to navigating the Florida Keys and discovering the dry Tortugas, this is a tale of ambition, survival, and the beginnings of a global story that ties directly to Key West. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's uncover the history behind this historic marker.
Welcome to Fun in Key West, where every day feels like a mini fest. Grab a drink, take it slow. We'll show you where the locals go. Food, fun, and stories to tell. Hidden gems you know so well. Your Key West experts here. It's fun in Key West every day.
Happy Monday to you. Thank you so much for joining me. I am Michelle with Fun in Key West, and today it is another episode of Historic Marker Monday. I know, it's hard to believe we're already on another Monday, and it's March. Can you believe that we've already come through January and February? And this coming weekend in the U.S., we spring ahead. So the nights are going to be a lot longer for daylight. So you're going to be able to get home from work and do all those fun things that you like to do. But we're going to explore something that's not quite connected to Key West, but there is a historic marker that marks it, and it's over on Duval Street. I think it's 1405 Duval Street. You're going to find this historic marker, and it's a marker to Ponce de León. And can you imagine sailing through the seas and exploring the world in the 1500s? You don't have maps, you don't have GPS, you don't have people who have been there, done it before. And that's what Ponce de Leon's group and all of his crews and ships, that's what they were doing. They were exploring out and about. In 1513, he sailed into what would become one of the most important discoveries in Florida history. So he discovered not only he discovered the Florida Keys, the dry Tortugas, and he named Florida. And so we're going to be talking about that today. This marker that you're going to see over on 1405 Duval Street, that is a marker that honors Leon, the Spanish explorer credited with discovering Florida and the Florida Keys for Spain. And it highlights his 1513, can you imagine that, 1513 voyage and the lasting significance of that expedition. It also ties Key West into a much bigger global story of empire, exploration, and navigation and survival. And you're going to see as we wander through these historic markers that they weave in and around the story of Spain and Cuba and all of that maritime history draws itself right into Key West. So, who was Ponce Leon? He was an accomplished Spanish explorer and military conquistador. He sailed with, I did not know this, that middle school history certainly keeps coming back, doesn't it? But he sailed with Christopher Columbus on Columbus's second voyage to the New World. And then later he led his own expeditions in the 1500s. He was appointed frontier governor of the Dominican Republic in 1502 and governor of Puerto Rico in 1509. He was not some random sailor, I guess, that was sailing through the Caribbean. He had crews, he had a proven track record, he had been experiencing all of the Caribbean. And he was deeply connected to Spain's efforts to claim land, expand their influence, and search for sources of wealth. By the time he set out in 1513, he had experienced a lot of things. So he had a lot of experience under his belt, he had political connections, and he was ambitious. And this was a serious mission with serious stakes in 1513. So the goal of the mission was to expand not only Spain's reach and its wealth, but keep in mind during this time, Spain was going through some political instability. And so Ponce de Leon had to personally finance this fleet that went out on the exploration. As you remember, going way back to that middle school history classes, you have where the country, Spain, funded these explorations. Well, this time, Spain did not fund the exploration, but he took out 3 ships. He took out the Santiago, the San Cristobal, and the Santa Maria de la Consolation. And his goals were basic, classic Empire Spanish goals. He wanted to search for gold. He wanted to expand the territory of Spain and their land claims. And he wanted to strengthen, believe it or not, strengthen his own power and his position. So he sailed from Puerto Rico, following the Bahamas island chain. And so this was not a sightseeing cruise. He had a clear mission in mind, and all 3 ships and their crew knew the mission. And it was, like I said, directly tied to power, resources, and absolute control. So he's coming along and he sees land. And the next day, the expedition landed on what they believed was a very large island. And he named it La Florida. And that name actually has 2 meanings. It's reflected the lush green subtropical landscape, and it connected to the Easter season, and which was translated loosely from Spanish into the Festival of Flowers. And historians still debate whether or not, where that actual first landing spot is. Most believe it was somewhere between St. Augustine and Melbourne. But at this point in time, I don't think it really matters. But even one of the most famous landfalls in American history still comes with a mystery. Because, again, we don't know where he landed, but we do know what he was trying to do. And so he named Florida, Florida. Then he tracks and continues his voyage, and he moves closer down to the Keys. So he names Florida, and then the fleet continues to sail south, and they're staying close to the shore. And by May 4th, they reach Biscayne Bay. And they took on some fresh water, because by this time they probably needed some fresh water, at an island they named Santa Marta, which is now known as Key Biscayne. And this stop because crucial because they needed that fresh water and that allowed them to continue on their voyage and gave them a longer runway for survival. And you're going to see that one of the biggest reoccurring themes in his exploration was the search for fresh water. And finding land was exciting because it was an opportunity to find drinkable water. So then he's going further south and then he reaches the Florida Keys. And by May 15th, he was moving through the Florida Keys. And at this point, Ponce de Leon still believed he was dealing with a giant island instead of a peninsula, which Florida is. And he was still looking for passage that would let him go north along the west coast. From a distance, the shape of the islands reminded him of suffering men. So he named the keys Las Martis, meaning the martyrs. And this is one of the earliest recorded European impressions of the Florida Keys. It's fascinating, though, if you picture the Keys before bridges and hotels and marinas and all of that activity. It's just a low chain of islands appearing out on the horizon. Can you imagine you're in the 1500s, you have no idea what you're coming up onto, and you see these islands and there's no bridges, there's no activity, and they just scatter. And I think it was poetic, it was dramatic, and probably a little eerie because it was like, I thought this was a big island, and now all of a sudden we're seeing these little ones. So he continues on his journey and show there's still some uncertainty. And so finally he finds a gap in the Keys and in the reefs, and they begin to move north. And by the 23rd of May, they've reached the west coast of the Florida mainland. And again, that exact location is still debated. Maybe it was Charlotte Harbor, maybe it was Cape Sable. Some even argue that it could be Pensacola. But most historians think likely location was farther south because of the travel time involved, because of the ability to get through the Keys, turn, head north, and the timing of when he landed. He probably was indeed a little farther south. Again, often debated. There's not a whole lot of records. That was a very, very long time ago. But it again, though, he made the landfall. And then when he makes landfall in the upper section of Florida, he makes contact with the Native Americans. And they anchored because they found land and they knew that they could get some fresh drinking water. And at first, the Native Americans approached them with an interest in trading. Hey, we've got this. What do you have? But relations quickly turned hostile. Skirmishes followed. There were battles that were taken on, and several people on each side were killed. And before Ponce de Leon's fleet left Florida, they took 8 indigenous people captive. And so that's a little bit of a darker side. You have somebody out there who is looking to explore and find new lands, and then they land, they meet the indigenous people, and he ends up taking 8 of them hostage. But based on the talking points that he had with his captives, that led him to move out into the Gulf and go towards the dry Tortugas. And so they went off about middle of June, started searching for the dry Tortugas. And they did reach them before the end of June that year. And the dry Tortugas are named because the Tortugas are for turtles, and dry meaning that there was no fresh water on land. And they found those giant sea turtles, they found Caribbean monk seals, and they found hundreds of seabirds. And the dry Tortugas may sound remote now, but to a 16th century crew, they were a blessing and a challenge. They were like, okay, we're going to go find this place and learn more about it. There was food. They found the sea turtles, they found the monk seals, and they found the seabirds, but they didn't find any fresh water. And as I've been saying, that is crucial to the survival of these fleets. But they took the sea turtles, and back then the sea turtles were abundant. They were very docile, very easy to take, and they were incredibly valuable to these sailors.
When they turned on their backs, they became very docile. And as a sea turtle lover, that hurts my heart. If they were kept wet, they could be stored alive in a ship's hold, and that meant that they could have fresh meat later on when they were out on the ocean, and they could have turtle meat or make turtle soup, and that allowed them to sustain themselves for longer voyages. It really does sound brutal today, doesn't it? But for sailors back in the 16th century, this allowed them the opportunity to cross the oceans and still survive. But then, after he provisioned the fleet and they got themselves all set up, he continued on, unaware of the Gulf Stream between Key West and Cuba. So he takes the turn and comes on back down. And that powerful current pushes them off course, and somewhere they end up landing on the northwest shore of Cuba. And this accident actually showed the crew the force of the Gulf Stream, and that helped mariners later on be able to shoot down through and take advantage of that Gulf Stream. And it helped for centuries thereafter. And it became one of the hidden gems that he discovered in this exploration. So he didn't just map Florida, he helped find that Gulf Stream and helped uncover one of those hidden highways in the Atlantic navigation. After realizing what had happened, the fleet retraced its route east along the Florida Keys, and they reached Grand Bahama on July 8th. And then he returned back to Puerto Rico in October. And he had been gone for nearly 8 months. That's a long time to be sailing. And though through unknown waters, navigating reefs, currents, weather, conflict, and supply shortages. And the fact that he made it back at all is part of what made the voyage so remarkable, especially given the time. No GPS, no maps, all of that. His final expedition was in 1521, and he returned to the region again in 1521, and this was his third and final expedition. This time, that mission was different. He wanted to settle and colonize the land to strengthen its legal political claim. Because back then, you could sail on and name it, claim it, but unless you colonized it, it was really hard to go back and say, you know what, that is really our land and our place. So he organized a major colonizing expedition. He gathered about 200 men, priests, farmers, artisans, 50 horses, domestic animals, farming tools, all of that you would need to colonize the land. So this was no longer exploration. This had a different mission. And this was an attempt to put in a permanent Spanish foothold. The expedition landed on the southwest coast of Florida near Charlotte Harbor. And there he and his men were attacked in a conflict with the indigenous people. And he was severely wounded. And it is believed he was struck in the thigh by an arrow that had poison on it from a tree. And after the attack, he and the surviving colonists headed back to Havana, Cuba, and there he died from his injuries. So his final chapter is a reminder that these expeditions were dangerous, uncertain, and often deadly. And for the fame attached to his name, his life ended not in triumph, but in the brutal reality of colonization and the resistance that the indigenous people put up for that colonization. So you're asking, Michelle, why does this matter to Key West? Well, it matters because it connects Key West to one of the earliest European explorations and expeditions in Florida history. It reminds us that the Florida Keys were part of that story from the absolute very beginning. And long before Key West became known for sunsets and cocktails and live music and Duval Street, these were waters that served as crossroads of exploration, navigation, and empires. The marker on Duval Street also highlights how the Keys were not just passed by. They were seen, named, and woven into the historical record. It's easy to walk by these markers and say, "Oh, that's cool. That's an exploration. That's an explorer. That's so cool. That's really neat." But when you start to dig into the history behind these markers, you learn so much more about not only Key West, Florida, maritime history, American history, but also the people who made Key West Key West. So, as we wrap up, first and foremost, Ponce de Leon thought Florida was a giant island. And if you hadn't seen it before, you probably would have thought the same thing. The Florida Keys, because of how they lay out, and if you've flown over the Florida Keys, you would probably relate to this. They looked like people that, it was in mourning. It was a sad place, according to Ponce de Leon. And so he named it after the martyrs. And the dried tortugas got their names after the sea turtles that they were able to gather there. And that was dry because there was no drinkable water there. And the Gulf Stream was discovered, and it was a way to hop on that Atlantic highway. So it's more than this story is more than just a tale of discovery. It's a story of ambition. It's a story of exploration. It's a story of survival. It's a story of conflict and a beginning, and it's the beginning of a massive transformation of the region. His route through the Florida Keys and the dried tortugas makes him part of Key West history and Florida history as well. And this historic marker gives us a chance to remember and think about the exploration and the outcome of that. So your next time you are on Duval Street and you see this marker, it's marker number 50, take a second, picture 3 small Spanish ships, and they're moving through the waters about 500 years ago, and they're chasing land and power and possibility. And all of that was around the Florida Keys in Key West. So as you can see, it's not quite a direct relationship to Key West, but it does have an impact on Key West history. And that's what I always like about these markers. They allow for such a fun opportunity to explore the history and learn so much more. While you are wandering through Key West and you see these historic markers, be sure to check them out. You can also go over to our website, FunInKeyWest.com, and I'm pulling together a really cool map that will help you find these markers so much easier, because some of them don't actually have a place where you can quickly go and find where they're located. So I want you to be able to find all those markers and be able to do your own little self-guided tour. There's lots more information over at FunInKeyWest.com on those self-guided tours. Plus on guides on where to eat and where to drink and where to stay, and amazing other things to do while you are in Key West and the Florida Keys. If you can't be in Key West or the Florida Keys, feel free to sign up for our free virtual book club. We have a book every month that we highlight that has some sort of connection to Key West or the Florida Keys. And we just launched the March book, and I hope you head over there and check that out. I am Michelle. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Historic Marker Monday. You have a great day, and we shall talk to you later. Thanks for joining me on this historic adventure through Ponce de Leon's 1513 voyage and its connection to Key West. From naming Florida to navigating the Gulf Stream, his journey reminds us of the rich maritime history that shaped Key West and the region. Next time you're strolling down Duval Street, take a moment to stop by this historic marker, number 50, and picture those 3 small Spanish ships chasing land, power, and possibility. If you're curious to explore more, head over to FunInKeyWest.com for guides, self-guided tours, and even a map to help you find all those historic markers around town. And don't forget to check out our virtual book club for even more Florida Keys-inspired fun. This has been Historic Marker Monday. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time.